In the heart of Minnesota, on a calm Friday evening in June 2025, tragedy erupted. A former Minnesota House Speaker was murdered in her own home. Another state senator was shot alongside his wife. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. It was a targeted political attack. The name behind this unprecedented violence: Vance Boetler, a 57-year-old man with a disturbing agenda, an arsenal of weapons, and a hit list that shook the foundations of American democracy. This is the full story behind one of the most shocking political assassinations in modern US history, a chilling exploration of how ideology, paranoia, and hatred can spiral into domestic terrorism. Before getting into this story fully, just look down and please help this channel grow. So, use 5 seconds to click the subscribe button. Thanks for subscribing, guys. So let's get straight into the story. On the night of June 14, 2025, multiple emergency calls were made in 2 towns, Princeton and Champlin. The first from a neighbor who heard gunshots next door. The second from a frantic survivor. Melissa Hortman, a respected Democratic lawmaker who once served as Speaker of the Minnesota House, and her husband, Vance Hortman, were shot dead in their home. Almost simultaneously, State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were gunned down in their Champlin residence. Miraculously, both survived the attack, but sustained serious injuries. The coordination between these attacks raised red flags immediately. The victims were not just private citizens. They were influential politicians, both Democrats, with long histories of public service. In the hours that followed, Minnesota law enforcement agencies joined forces with the FBI and Homeland Security. A special task force was launched. It was clear this was an organized assassination attempt on political targets. Forensic experts began analyzing the crime scenes. The shooter used a suppressed rifle, precision shots, no forced entry. It was someone who had studied their victims, someone who knew how to kill. Who is Vance Boetler? Born in 1967 in Minnesota, Vance Boetler was a quiet, ambitious student who graduated top of his class. He studied business administration and eventually became the CEO of a regional logistics company. For most of his adult life, Boetler appeared to be a model citizen, stable career, married once, no criminal history. But in 2015, after a series of financial losses and his wife's death in a car accident, Boetler's life began to unravel. Co-workers noticed behavioral changes: paranoia, anger, extreme political views. By 2020, Boetler had sold his company and disappeared from public life. He spent several years abroad, primarily in Kenya and Uganda, where he joined a network of expatriates, some of whom, investigators say, espoused anti-government views. When he returned to Minnesota in 2023, Boetler was no longer the man people once knew. He moved into a remote cabin in Mille Lacs County, cut ties with family, and began posting on encrypted forums under usernames like Red Warrior 47 and True Fed Walker. Neighbors described him as odd, but not threatening, until he stopped making eye contact and was seen wearing tactical gear around his property. He had turned his cabin into a fortress. On June 17, after Boetler's arrest, FBI agents combed through his property. In a locked drawer, they discovered what would become the central piece of the case: a meticulously written hit list, over 70 names, mostly Minnesota state lawmakers, judges, and activists. The list was not random. It included lawmakers who supported abortion rights, LGBTQ protections, and stricter gun control. Beside each name were home addresses, daily schedules, and hand-drawn maps. Also found fake police uniforms, car plates from multiple states, survival rations, and surveillance equipment. Boetler had been preparing for months, maybe years, for a domestic terror spree. Forensic analysis of his digital devices revealed searches like "how to kill quietly," politician home locations, and "how long until death by blood loss." There was no doubt Boetler saw himself as a soldier in a personal war. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was Boetler's 82-page manifesto. Titled The Reclamation Protocol, it outlined his belief that America was under siege by internal traitors, politicians who had, in his words, sold the country to moral decay. He detailed his cleansing strategy, beginning in Minnesota and spreading nationwide. He described the murders not as crimes, but as acts of liberation. Much of the document was filled with white nationalist and extremist Christian ideologies, echoing language used in other domestic terror attacks. He referenced the Oklahoma City bombing and quoted extensively from manifestos written by mass shooters. Law enforcement analysts warned that such manifestos can inspire copycat crimes, leading to increased monitoring of fringe forums and dark web networks. The manhunt for Boetler spanned 48 hours. Local authorities were joined by the FBI, ATF, and US Marshals. His vehicle had been found abandoned near a state park. From there, agents knew he was on foot, armed and dangerous. Tactical teams set up perimeter zones, while helicopters and drones scanned the forest. Area residents were advised to stay indoors. Police increased presence around the homes of listed targets. On the morning of June 16th, Boetler was spotted via thermal imaging inside a rundown hunting cabin. A SWAT team moved in. He was found sleeping, wearing a stolen deputy uniform, his AR-15 within reach. Boetler surrendered without a fight. His final words to arresting officers, "I only got 2. The rest will come later." The arrest was only the beginning. Boetler was charged with double homicide, attempted murder, domestic terrorism, and over a dozen federal counts related to weapons and stalking. He entered a plea of not guilty, triggering what is expected to be one of the most closely watched domestic terrorism trials in US history. Federal prosecutors argue that the case must set a precedent for politically motivated violence. Meanwhile, Boetler's defense team is attempting to frame him as mentally ill, though psychiatrists disagree, labeling him methodical and capable. Security around state capitals was temporarily increased. More than 35 lawmakers were placed under surveillance protection. The Department of Homeland Security issued a bulletin warning of potential copycats. This case is being compared to the 2011 shooting of Gabrielle Giffords and the January 6 Capitol attack, but with a more premeditated and lethal intent. Across Minnesota, candlelight vigils were held for Melissa Hortman. Her colleagues praised her integrity, her commitment to education, and her vision for a more inclusive state. Senator Hoffman, from his hospital bed, gave a video statement. "The bullets meant to silence us will only amplify our resolve. Democracy will not be intimidated." Governor Tim Walz delivered a televised address, vowing to combat extremism with stronger laws and increased support for public officials. Political scientists note that while partisan tension is not new, violence of this nature represents a dangerous escalation in America's ideological divide. Meanwhile, social media has seen an outpouring of grief, outrage, and unfortunately, support for Boetler from fringe communities. The digital world remains divided, a reflection of the nation itself. The story of Vance Boetler is one of radicalization, of a man who traded reason for rage and committed acts that will scar a state and a country for years to come. But it's also the story of resilience, of survivors, law enforcement, and a political system that, though shaken, stands tall. Let this case be a warning. Words have power, and unchecked hate can manifest in deadly ways. This has been America's Biggest Crimes. If you value deep reporting and storytelling, please subscribe and share. More stories of truth, tragedy, and justice await.